Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Continuing with the several videos that I'm going to be putting out all relating to my recent wedding, today we are going to be attempting to DIY preserve my wedding bouquet. So it's a bit of an experiment. I'm not quite sure how it's going to turn out at the end, but hopefully it'll be looking good. Like many brides, I really loved my bouquet that I had at my wedding, and I would like to be able to kind of keep a semblance of it forever as a nice memento for my wedding. You can get your wedding bouquet preserved by a professional florist, and if you have the money and the wherewithal to do that, by all means, but it is quite an expensive process, especially depending on how big your bouquet is. So I decided to instead attempt to DIY do it myself. So I did a little bit of research on doing it yourself, and today we're going to unveil my flowers after they've been drying and attempt to kind of recreate the look of my bouquet in this little vase that I have here, so that I can have it kind of on display in my house. Before we really get into things, don't forget to support my channel by either subscribing so you can see more from me, or feel free to go and give me a follow over on Instagram at rachelalmond.digs. Okay, let's dig in. In terms of my tools that I have today, I have basically 2 tubs filled with my flowers that have been drying for several weeks actually, which is a lot longer than you need to do it for. I just haven't had time to record this video, so I've just left them. And then I've got some florist wire and some florist tape. And then I also have my trusty old Leatherman to help cut the florist wire. So as you may have noticed, I started the process of this and almost right after my wedding. So I started this process almost immediately after my wedding, when my flowers were at their freshest and best looking. I ordered 2 tubs of 2 kilos each of silica gel off of Amazon. So that's 4 kilos of silica gel in total. And then the boxes that I have everything are just cheap plastic boxes that I got from Poundland. Silica gel is a bit of a misleading name because it actually looks and has more of the texture of like a sand. So it's like granular, it's not like a liquid, and it is something that is used very often to combat humidity and to dry things out. You know, you always have little pouches of them whenever you buy new clothes or purses or whatever. Silica gel is something that is often used by archaeologists in terms of the preservation of finds, which is a great tie back to archaeology for me. There are several different methods that you can use for drying your flowers that I looked at. Most common and cheapest is obviously hanging them upside down in a cool, dark place. But when I read about that, I think often one of the things that happens is you use a lot of the color, and the colors change on a lot of your flowers, and I wanted to try and preserve my colors as much as possible. You can also try to perhaps set them in resin. I don't remember if they have to be dried before or after you do that, but that is a lot more time intensive, and I think requires at least a little bit more expertise. It's not something that you can necessarily just like pick up and do. So I felt like using the silica gel, it was a nice middle ground because it helps preserve the color a little more, but it's also not as learning intensive as something like using epoxy or resin. So it's important to note that if you're going to use silica gel, that you need a lot of it. As I said, I ordered about 4 kilos worth of this stuff, and I definitely didn't have enough because ideally you want to be able to cover your flowers completely while they're drying. I had enough for maybe like 2/3 of my flowers, but definitely not for all of it. So some of them might not come out so great, which is fine. I'm entirely prepared to potentially have to go and either buy more flowers to dry out later, because silica gel is something that you can reset and reuse, or I could even buy some flake flowers to just kind of fill in some of the gaps if some of the flowers haven't turned out as well. I also want to do a quick safety note here in that any plastic tubs that you're using for storing silica gel should not be later reused for any kind of food storage. This is because the plastic is porous, and so the silica can get into the plastic and potentially poison you. I'm not sure how seriously it could poison you, but it would not be good. So that's just not safe. So that's why I just went and got some cheap plastic boxes from Poundland as opposed to using some that I already had on hand. I started the process by eviscerating my bouquet, cutting it all up, and then cutting all of the blooms so that there is about 1 inch to 2 inches left of stem on each of them. And then I filled the tub with a layer, like a base layer of silica gel, and then I put all of the blooms face standing in the gel, and then I used the rest of the gel to kind of fill around the blooms and inside of them as well to try and make sure that they got as thoroughly covered as possible. And so then I put the lids on them and I left them. So I haven't looked at them since then, so hopefully everything's turned out really nice. So I'm gonna start today by taking out each stem and then gently shaking it to get out as much of the silica gel as possible. So I'm gonna actually, in the interest of safety, because I don't think it's great to breathe in silica gel either, I'm just gonna put a mask on. Okay, so I finished gently removing all of the flowers from the gel and then shaking them out as gently as I could to try and get rid of as much of the gel as possible. I think there's still some here. And then I went and washed my hands because even I could feel from the silica like it was drying me out, and obviously, as I said, I don't want to potentially get that on any food. So they've actually turned out really well, I think. The white blooms have kept their color really nicely. Quite pleased with that. Same with the thistles. This flower here, which I actually have absolutely no idea what kind of flower it is, I think it's gonna be quite difficult to use, but I'm gonna try anyway. Next up is adding the floral wire and like wrapping it around the stems and then wrapping some floral tape around that so that when I'm putting it into the foam, I'm not gonna accidentally break the stems because like they feel quite hard, but I think if I try to apply a significant amount of force to try and really get them through the foam, they're probably gonna snap on me. So I'd rather be safe than sorry. This is probably gonna take some time. So again, I'm gonna do a time lapse. Okay, so I have finished putting all of the wire and floral tape onto my flowers. In terms of time, wrapping all the stems and everything probably took me about an hour, and taking them all out of the silica gel probably took about a half hour. I did have to sacrifice a few because I was either too ham-fisted or they didn't really suit it. These ones turned out a lot better than I thought. I think usually you are supposed to just go through the stem, but I think you're supposed to do that before you dry the flowers. So my bad. So instead what I ended up doing was just putting the wire next to the stem with some tape on it and then wrapping it down. I left the wires quite long just so I have the flexibility of being able to either cut them to be shorter so that I can have like a little bit of dimension to the final product, hopefully. I also didn't put wire on any of my eucalyptus greenery because it's got a quite thick stem. So I did start putting it through the foam and it seemed to be doing okay. And then as well, I didn't add any to this, whatever this is. I actually don't know what flowers these are at all, but it's very woody, so, oh God, it's also shedding pine needles like everywhere. But the stem of this is quite thick, so I don't think it really needs wire to help it go into the foam. I didn't mention at the beginning of this video was that before I cut my entire bouquet apart to start drying it, I took quite a few photos on my nice camera of it so that I can reference those to help me recreate the general look of the bouquet. And so I have those on a computer near me, and I am just going to spend some time now putting it all together. So I'll have a little video of me doing that you want to watch and see, and then we'll have the final product at the very end. Fun, fun, fun. right, so we have our final product here, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm really impressed with myself. I honestly, when I started doing this today, I wasn't quite sure that it was going to work out as nicely as it has. This was definitely a lot easier than I expected it to be. It's obviously not like an exact replica of how my bouquet looked on the day, but it is all the same flowers, and I don't think there's any really like obvious gaps in the floristry, which is probably the thing that I was most worried about, that you were going to really notice the foam underneath. I'm kind of like blown away with this. Not necessarily at myself, but just at how nice it looks. The shape I think is maybe a bit wonky, but I didn't want a bouquet on the day that was like really uniform in shape, so it's turned out a bit more uniform than I expected, but I think I can maybe pull some stuff out to give it a bit more dimension later. But overall, I'm well impressed. Well impressed, as they say here in Scotland. Like, this turned out so much better than I expected. Proves that it can be done at home. All right, so I think the only thing to maybe finish this off would be to put some like fixidant or fixing spray on it. One of the things that I read a lot of people use is hairspray, which I certainly have a lot of, but I don't want it to potentially ruin any of the flowers. So I'm actually gonna test it probably on the flowers that I either broke or that didn't quite make it first before I try it on this. Thank you for watching, staying through to the end. If you like this video, if you like the bouquet, give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to support my channel, please subscribe, and also go give me a follow over on Instagram. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, put them in the comment section down below and I will do my best to answer them. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!